The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919. It was not fire, it was not water, it was not ice, nor earthquake, nor bomb. On a deceptively warm January afternoon in 1919, Boston was attacked by a tidal wave that moved at 35 miles per hour, stood 25 feet high, and possessed the kinetic energy of an artillery shell. This deadly wave was sticky, brown, sweet, and utterly fatal. It was made entirely of molasses. The Sentinel of Sugar. The north end of Boston, a neighborhood then dominated by Italian immigrants and bustling maritime industry, usually smelled of brine and coal smoke. But for years leading up to the disaster, the air was frequently heavy with another scent, a sickly sweet, fermenting aroma emanating from the giant steel structure that towered over the dockyards. This behemoth, a tank belonging to the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of the powerful United States Industrial Alcohol, or USIA, was a true monstrosity of industrial architecture. 50 feet high and 90 feet in diameter, it contained over 2.3 million gallons of raw, unrefined molasses. This wasn't candy-making syrup. It was the raw material for industrial alcohol, critical for wartime munitions, and, ironically, the rum production that was soon to be outlawed by the imminent prohibition. The tank itself was a monument to negligence. Built hastily in 1915, its construction was overseen by Arthur Gell, an accountant with no structural engineering experience. The steel plates used were dangerously thin, reportedly half the thickness recommended for safely containing such a dense liquid. From the moment it was filled, the tank was a structural catastrophe waiting to happen. Local residents and even the company's own employees frequently reported ominous noises, a loud metallic groaning that seemed to emanate from the structure, especially when it was freshly filled. More alarmingly, large, visible cracks began to spiderweb across the tank's exterior, sometimes oozing the sweet brown substance onto the streets below. USIA's response to these clear warning signs was criminal in its inadequacy. Instead of emptying the tank for repair, they often simply painted over the cracks with a dark brown paint, attempting to camouflage the catastrophic failure points. Just days before the disaster, a new shipment of warm molasses had been pumped into the tank, stressing the structure further as the warmer liquid expanded against the colder syrup already inside. The immense pressure was reaching its breaking point, focused right where the steel sheets were feebly riveted together. The stage for an improbable disaster was set.
The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919, Part 2, The Catastrophic Rupture. The thundering roar. At exactly 12:30 p.m., the structural negligence culminated in sudden, violent failure. The moment began not with a single explosion, but with a terrifying, prolonged metallic sound, described by witnesses as a prolonged rumble, followed by a thundering roar, just like a cannon going off. The weakest points of the tank, the riveted seams at the base, gave way simultaneously. 2,300,000 gallons of molasses, weighing approximately 13,000 tons, were released with a pressurized, explosive force. This was not a fluid spill, it was a detonation of raw kinetic energy. Within seconds, the molasses formed a towering reddish-brown wave that peaked at an astonishing 25 feet high. Driven by the immense mass and pressure differential, this wave surged outward at an estimated speed of 35 miles per hour. Its power was far beyond that of a simple water flood, due to the sheer density of the liquid. The wave's impact was swift and devastating. It slammed into the support pillars of the adjacent Boston Elevated Railway, instantly buckling the steel structure and derailing a train car. The destruction extended rapidly. The wave tore across Commercial Street, instantly crushing the Engine 31 fire station, killing several firefighters inside. It smashed the municipal stable and the Public Works building, trapping dozens of workers and horses. People who were simply walking the streets or eating lunch were swept up, instantly killed by blunt force trauma as they were slammed into immovable objects or crushed beneath the immense, heavy tide. The initial blast and the wave's powerful hydrodynamics annihilated everything in its path, creating a scene of absolute, impossible devastation. The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919, Part 3, The Physics of Terror. The sticky quicksand. The immediate explosive impact accounted for many casualties, but the sheer physics of the molasses created a nightmare scenario for those who survived the initial wave. Molasses, particularly the crude type stored in the tank, is roughly 40% denser than water, with specific gravity of about 1.4. This meant that every cubic foot of the fluid struck with a crushing, suffocating weight, capable of pinning victims to the ground and breaking bones. People were not simply floating, they were submerged in a heavy, inescapable substance that immobilized them with terrifying efficiency. The unique danger was dramatically amplified by the winter temperature. The molasses had been pumped into the tank warm, around 86 degrees Fahrenheit, to aid flow, but once it was spread across the cold ground in the 40-degree Fahrenheit ambient air, its temperature plummeted. This rapid cooling caused its viscosity to skyrocket. What had been a fast-moving wave quickly transformed into a thick, clinging, and virtually immovable paste. This dense, sticky mass acted like a quicksand of sugar, trapping people and horses beneath its weight, clogging their noses and throats, and muffling their cries for help. The scene became one of silent, horrific struggle. The victims found themselves fighting against a medium that was too heavy to push aside, and too sticky to wade through. The dying screams of those trapped were described as guttural and muffled, their fight for life quickly silenced as the molasses sealed their airways. The death toll was 21 human lives and over 150 injured, compounded by the loss of several dozen horses that were either instantly crushed or entombed in the thickening brown sludge. The atmosphere was one of sweet, overpowering fermentation mixing with the stench of destruction, a truly surreal and macabre environment. The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919, Part 4, The Aftermath and Legal Precedent. The Fight for Accountability. The immediate aftermath saw a heroic but nightmarish rescue effort. Over 100 sailors from the nearby U.S. Navy training ship, the USS Nantucket, were the first organized responders. They waded into the thick, chest-deep mess, navigating a landscape where the living, the injured, and the dead were all uniformly coated in brown, clinging sludge. The molasses was so tenacious that rescuers had to use kerosene on their hands and feet simply to move without becoming trapped themselves. The struggle was not only against the physical danger, but the sheer difficulty of movement and the psychological horror of the sticky, sweet burial ground. The cleanup effort proved to be a monumental logistical challenge. The molasses had permeated every conceivable space. It filled basements, burst into sewer lines, and coated the streets to a depth of several feet. For weeks, hundreds of laborers worked to clear the site. Standard water hoses were ineffective. The cleaning crew was ultimately forced to use fireboats to spray salt water from the harbor, which proved the only effective solvent against the viscous syrup. Even after the city spent weeks clearing the physical damage, the historical footprint remained. It is reported that for decades afterwards, on warm summer days, the sickly sweet fermenting odor of molasses would rise from the ground in the north end, a haunting, sensory memory of the tragic event. The disaster led to the longest, most exhaustive, and most expensive civil suit in Massachusetts history, lasting 4 years. USIA fought desperately, clinging to the ludicrous defense that the tank had been bombed by Italian anarchists. However, the exhaustive testimony, from engineers detailing the insufficient steel thickness to witnesses recounting the ignored leaks and groaning sounds, irrefutably proved corporate negligence. The final ruling ordered USIA to pay $600,000, over $10 million today, to the victims and their families. More importantly, this case established a landmark legal precedent. It solidified the requirement for engineers to seal and test industrial structures and laid the foundational legal framework for modern building standards and corporate accountability in industrial infrastructure throughout the United States. If you found the true story of the Molasses Flood unbelievable, please hit the like button and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. For more deep dives into history's most shocking events, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.